Have you ever noticed how quiet the world becomes when the lights are low and the day finally loosens its grip on your thoughts? Have you ever wondered why, in those late hours, your mind drifts back to simple questions, questions about meaning, about beginnings, about what was there before everything else began? And what if the calm you feel right now is closer to those beginnings than you realize? The modern world rarely gives us silence. Days are filled with alerts, voices, screens, and expectations that pull attention in every direction at once. Even when the room grows dark, the mind keeps moving, replaying moments, worries, unfinished thoughts. Yet there is something about the night that gently invites all of that motion to slow. Sound softens, time feels less urgent, and in that quiet space the heart becomes open again, ready to listen. This is where the Gospel of John begins, not with noise, not with crowds, not with action, but with stillness. John does not rush forward. He pauses. He invites the listener to step back, far beyond busy streets and restless thoughts, beyond history itself, and into a calm that existed before anything was named. His words do not argue or explain. They rest, they settle, they speak the way night speaks. In the beginning was the Word. These words are often read quickly, yet they were never meant to be hurried. They do not demand analysis. They ask for quiet attention. Before light and shadow, before sound and movement, before fear and hope, there was presence. Not emptiness, not chaos, presence. A calm awareness that did not need to prove itself or speak loudly to be known. Imagine a moment before clocks, before voices, before footsteps on the ground. No urgency, no direction, just a deep, steady stillness. Not lonely, not cold, simply complete. John invites the listener to rest there, even if only for a moment, and to feel what it might be like to exist without pressure or demand. In this place, nothing is missing, and nothing is rushing toward an end. John's Gospel feels different because it is written from this quiet place. It does not start by telling you what to do. It begins by reminding you what already is. The Word, as John speaks of it, is not a sentence or a sound. It is meaning itself. It is understanding without explanation. It is connection without effort. And it has always been there, waiting patiently, even during the noisiest moments of life. As the night deepens, it becomes easier to understand why this opening feels so comforting. Silence has a way of making things feel closer, not farther away. When distractions fade, the idea of a calm beginning no longer feels distant or abstract. It feels familiar. It feels like the quiet you are resting in right now, the kind that does not ask anything from you. John does not rush to introduce names or places. He does not explain rules or traditions. He invites the listener to slow down first, to let the mind loosen its grip, to remember that before effort, before struggle, before uncertainty, there was something steady and gentle holding everything together. In this opening stillness, there is no argument between belief and doubt. There is only listening. There is only being present. The Word is described as light, yet not the kind that startles or blinds. It is the kind that rests softly, revealing without forcing, warming without burning. A light that does not chase away darkness but quietly exists alongside it, unchanged. As you settle deeper into this calm, the story begins to feel less like history and more like memory. Not a memory of events, but a memory of peace. The kind that feels known even if it has never been named. John's opening lines seem to say that meaning was never something humans had to invent. It was already there, waiting to be noticed. This is not a beginning that demands excitement. It invites rest. It invites the listener to release the habit of constant thinking and to allow understanding to arrive without effort. The Word does not arrive suddenly. It does not interrupt. It simply is, steady and patient, like the quiet that settles into a room after the last sound fades away. As the story gently takes shape, it becomes clear that this calm beginning is not separate from the world you live in now. The same presence that existed before time still moves quietly beneath everything, beneath noise, beneath fear, beneath the endless motion of daily life. John's words remind the listener that silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. Before anything was made, before anyone asked questions or searched for answers, there was calm awareness, and that calm has never left. It waits in quiet moments like this one, when the world softens and the mind grows tired enough to stop trying so hard. If you are finding comfort in this slow unfolding, you are welcome to stay here. If these stories bring you peace, you may choose to support this space by subscribing to the channel, so these gentle nights can continue. And if you feel like sharing, you can write your name in the comments, along with the city you are watching from and the time of night you are listening. Let it be simple, let it be quiet. And then, when you are ready, allow the story to continue, just as calmly as it began. The night often feels heavier than the day, though its weight is quiet and unassuming. In the darkness, there is a kind of confusion that cannot be measured, a loneliness that settles around the heart like soft shadows that move without sound. Even when the world is silent, there can be a restless stirring within the mind, a spinning of thoughts that refuses to stop. These thoughts are small, flickering worries and questions that seem to gather together, making the night feel endless, as if every breath must carry the weight of unseen burdens. There is a stillness to the world outside, but inside, the heart and mind can feel like a storm without wind or rain, a heaviness that cannot be shaken. It is in such darkness that the idea of light becomes meaningful, not the sudden glare of a fire or the harsh interruption of a spotlight, but a gentle, soft light that arrives quietly, almost without announcement, light that does not demand attention but simply exists, and in existing, it transforms the perception of everything around it. Imagine a candle placed in a dark room, its warmth unnoticed at first, but gradually spreading until it touches every corner of the space. This is the kind of light the Gospel speaks of, one that does not overwhelm but reassures, one that enters not with spectacle but with a steady, quiet presence. Jesus is introduced into this darkness not as a warrior or a commanding figure, but as someone whose presence itself soothes. There is no need for force, no dramatic declarations to assert authority. Instead, there is calm and intention in every gesture, every word, every pause. His steps are unhurried, his voice soft, and the world seems to respond not to a display of power but to a quiet invitation to trust and rest. In the midst of emotional weight and confusion, his presence feels like a pause, like a place where the heart can lay down its burdens without needing to explain them or solve them immediately. The light and presence that he brings have a way of meeting darkness exactly where it is, without demanding that the darkness disappear. John 1-5 says that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. This is not a dramatic battle, not a clash of opposing forces, but a subtle, persistent truth. The light exists alongside the shadows, quietly permeating, gradually touching what has seemed impenetrable. Even the smallest flicker matters, for it offers a guide through the night, a reminder that no matter how restless or heavy the darkness feels, there is a calm that can still be found within it. Consider how darkness often mirrors our inner struggles. Even in moments that appear calm outwardly, the mind can churn with fear, regret, and uncertainty. The loneliness that sometimes accompanies modern life, the quiet hours when no one is speaking, when the heart feels isolated, resembles the same ancient darkness described in John's opening. Yet, in these moments, the light that enters does not need an audience. It does not require acknowledgement to exist. It quietly settles, offering reassurance simply by being. The world outside may continue in shadow, but within, the presence of light begins to soften the tension, slowly untangling knots of worry and unrest. As the night stretches on, imagine the soft glow touching everything without hurry. The darkness does not vanish instantly, but it becomes less oppressive, less suffocating. Shadows shift and lose their sharp edges. What once seemed empty now contains space for thought, reflection, and even comfort. In the stillness, the light reveals what has always been there but overlooked, the possibility of peace, of calm, of a quiet understanding that does not demand anything from you except the willingness to notice. This gentle arrival of light parallels experiences in our own lives. Moments of clarity, understanding, or relief rarely happen with force or announcement. They appear quietly, sometimes in the middle of confusion or after a long period of uncertainty. Perhaps it is a soft word from a friend, a memory that surfaces in silence, or a feeling of calm that descends unexpectedly in the middle of a restless day. Like the light described in John, these moments do not banish the struggles entirely, but they exist alongside them, allowing the heart to find rest amidst the ongoing turbulence. In this quiet illumination, the restless heart begins to notice subtleties it had not before. The tension in the chest softens, the racing of thoughts eases, The world does not need to change for peace to arrive. It simply waits to be recognized. There is a rhythm to this light, a slow, deliberate unfolding that feels natural, unforced. It teaches that comfort and reassurance are not always sudden or dramatic, but often quiet and persistent, like the steady pulse of calm beneath chaos. Jesus' presence in the midst of darkness models this idea in a human and relatable way. His steps do not cause fear, his words do not demand immediate action, and yet everything around him feels different not because of power, but because of attention, gentleness, and intention. Imagine sitting in a dim room, the shadows stretching long across the walls, and feeling a warmth slowly fill the space. It does not rush, it does not compete, it simply is. And in the simplicity of its being, it changes how you perceive the room, the night, and even yourself. The weight of solitude and uncertainty, so often magnified in the quiet hours, begins to lift slightly in the presence of this soft light. Where there was tension, there is now a subtle release. Where thoughts felt tangled and insistent, there is space for them to unwind. Where there was a sense of isolation, there is now an invisible companionship that does not demand, that does not judge. This is the essence of the light, entering a restless world, calm without force, presence without interruption, and guidance without pressure. Even as you listen to this unfolding, you may sense parallels between the ancient night John describes and your own inner restlessness. Perhaps you have felt overwhelmed by thoughts, doubts, or worries that no one sees. Perhaps the hours before sleep bring questions that cannot be answered immediately. In these moments, it is the quiet, steady light, the gentle presence that asks nothing of you that begins to soothe the mind. It enters softly, not to chase the darkness away violently, but to allow rest, understanding, and a gentle shift in perception. The darkness remains, as it always has, but it becomes a backdrop rather than a burden. The light is patient and consistent, moving slowly through the unseen spaces, reminding the heart and mind that even in the heaviest night, there is a calm that can exist quietly alongside confusion, fear, and loneliness. This calm does not ask for acknowledgement, nor does it compete for attention. It simply is, present in a world that often moves too quickly to notice such subtle comfort. And so, the restless world that seems full of weight and shadow begins to experience a shift, not because the night disappears, but because the light has entered quietly, gently, and persistently. Every movement, every thought, every moment of awareness feels slightly softened. The tension, the pressure, the confusion, all of it becomes a little less pressing, a little less insistent. And in that softening, there is space to breathe, to reflect, and to rest. This is the way light enters a restless world, not by demanding attention, not by making a dramatic display, but by being steady, calm, and quietly persistent. It does not overwhelm, it does not shout, and it does not erase the night. It simply allows peace to begin gently, softly, as if reminding the heart that even in darkness, presence can be felt, understood, and welcomed. In this slow unfolding, the mind and spirit are given permission to rest, to relax, and to let the night carry them gently forward, as if nothing in the world outside could disturb the quiet that has begun to settle within. The streets were empty, wrapped in the quiet hush of night, and a faint glow from dimly lit lanterns traced shadows along the worn stone paths. The air was cool, carrying with it a sense of stillness that felt almost sacred, as if the city itself had paused to listen. Every footstep seemed softer than usual, almost swallowed by the darkness that lingered in the corners of alleys and the spaces between buildings. In this gentle solitude, the world felt both intimate and expansive, a place where thoughts could drift freely without interruption. It was in this quiet, almost suspended moment that Nicodemus walked alone, his mind stirring with a mixture of awe, confusion, and longing that had kept him awake for many nights before. Nicodemus had been a teacher among his people, a Pharisee who understood the scriptures and the traditions of the elders, yet even with knowledge and authority, there remained a subtle restlessness within him. He had seen many things, debated many ideas, and guided others with careful reasoning. But the questions that now hovered in the still night were different questions that did not respond to logic or debate. They were whispers that nudged at the heart, quiet but insistent, asking whether there could be a way to renew the spirit, to feel alive beyond the routine of duty and expectation. He felt a tension between what he understood in his mind and what he longed to feel in his soul, a tension that had brought him out into the night. The air felt soft around him, yet heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Nicodemus wondered if he dared to step beyond the familiar, to seek what he could not fully define. And then, in the quiet, he saw a figure waiting, a presence that seemed calm, unhurried, yet profoundly aware. Jesus stood there, not in the midst of a crowd, not in the brightness of the day, but in the subtle hush of midnight. There was no urgency in his posture, no assertion of power or dominance, only a serene openness that invited trust. Nicodemus hesitated, caught between caution and curiosity, the careful walls he had built around his thoughts softening slightly under the quiet authority of this presence. They spoke in whispers, their words almost blending with the rustling of night air, the distant hum of the sleeping city, and the faint flicker of lantern light. Nicodemus's questions came slowly, each one weighed with thought, careful not to expose too much of his inner uncertainty. He spoke of the teachings he had followed, the rules he had observed, and the knowledge he had accumulated. But beneath his words lay an unspoken tension, a desire for something more, something that could touch the soul rather than merely the mind. Jesus listened with patience, never interrupting, never rushing the conversation, allowing each question to breathe and settle before responding. "Teacher," Nicodemus began softly, "how can one see the kingdom of God?" The words trembled slightly, betraying the fear and wonder that accompanied such a question. He was careful, choosing his phrasing to honor what he had learned, yet also to conceal the depth of his personal longing. There was a sense of vulnerability in asking, a quiet admission that understanding might not come through knowledge alone. And in the silence that followed, the night seemed to lean closer, as though waiting with them, holding space for the exchange that was both ordinary and extraordinary. Jesus spoke gently, his voice low and steady, carrying a weight of calm that seemed to rest on the very air around them. "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." The words were simple, yet they carried a resonance that echoed quietly in Nicodemus's mind. The idea was not new, yet it was presented in a way that felt profoundly personal, like an invitation rather than a lesson. To be born again was not a command or a demand, but a chance to experience renewal, a soft rebirth of the spirit that allowed the soul to rest, to feel unburdened by the weight of accumulated fears and doubts. Nicodemus's brow furrowed slightly, a sign of the inner struggle unfolding in silence. He pondered what it meant to be born again, whether it was something one could accomplish through effort, or if it was a gift quietly given, softly received. His mind circled the words, turning them over as one might examine a fragile object, careful not to break it, but eager to understand its texture, its form, and its meaning. The night held him in its embrace, a gentle witness to his reflections, offering the freedom to consider without pressure, without expectation, without judgment. The conversation continued, subtle, reflective, each exchange measured and quiet. Jesus spoke of water and spirit, of renewal and stillness, weaving metaphors that seemed to float like lantern light across the empty streets. There was no rush to explain, no need to persuade, no urgency to convert. Each idea was allowed to linger, to settle, to touch Nicodemus in the depths where words could reach only when spoken with patience and care. Nicodemus listened, his thoughts unfolding like soft ripples across a pond, disturbed but not broken, illuminated by a quiet understanding that arrived without force. As the minutes stretched into hours, the restlessness that had accompanied Nicodemus through countless nights began to soften. The fear that had whispered questions too fragile to voice now felt less sharp, less insistent. The doubt that had tangled his heart loosened slightly, like threads gently pulled free in a quiet hand. Curiosity, once anxious, now became a tender exploration, a willingness to consider that renewal might indeed be possible, not as a feat of effort but as a gentle transformation of the inner life, a quiet turning toward a deeper calm. Through this midnight exchange, the night itself became a companion to their words. Shadows that had seemed heavy and foreboding now appeared softer, more like resting places for thought than obstacles. The faint glow of the lanterns reflected on the stones beneath their feet, offering a quiet illumination that mirrored the subtle understanding forming in Nicodemus's heart. There was no need for dramatic gestures or emphatic declarations. The conversation itself, slow and reflective, was enough to create a sense of peace, a space in which questions could exist without fear of judgment and curiosity could breathe freely. Nicodemus began to feel that being born again was not a task to be completed, but a quiet invitation to notice the stillness within oneself, to accept the possibility of renewal without pressure or force. It was the kind of change that arrived slowly, gently, much like the soft unfolding of the night into dawn, or the gradual rise of moonlight across sleeping rooftops. The notion of rest intertwined with understanding, showing that spiritual renewal could be a comfort rather than a challenge, a quiet turning of the heart rather than an act of struggle. Every word, every pause, every reflective moment carried with it the weight of gentle guidance. The dialogue was not meant to push Nicodemus forward in haste, but to allow him to move naturally at his own pace, to notice the subtleties of the night, the softness of lantern light, the calm of the streets, and the quiet strength of presence itself. Each idea hung in the air, softly illuminated by understanding, as if the world had slowed to accommodate the delicate exchange between curiosity and calm, between fear and gentle hope. In the quiet of those empty streets, Nicodemus's mind wandered to the questions he had carried for so long. Could he truly be born again? Could there be renewal for someone burdened by doubt, expectation, and responsibility? And as he reflected, the answers seemed to arrive not in words, but in the sense of stillness that the night provided, in the gentle cadence of a conversation that did not demand immediate comprehension, in the subtle presence that reassured him without interruption. It was an understanding that unfolded slowly, like shadows shifting beneath lantern light, revealing that even in restlessness there could be peace. The conversation stretched like the night itself, unhurried, reflective, and intimate. Nicodemus felt his questions soften, his uncertainty loosen, and his curiosity expand into quiet wonder. The midnight air wrapped around them, carrying the gentle warmth of dialogue and the serene presence of someone who understood the weight of searching hearts. The calm of night, the softness of lanterns, the reflective tone of words, they all worked together, allowing Nicodemus to sense, in a subtle but undeniable way, the possibility of renewal, the gentle invitation to be reborn in spirit, and the quiet assurance that the questions he carried were seen and honored. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, soft shadows across the dusty path that led to the well. The air was warm but still, carrying only the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional whisper of a breeze across the surface of the water. In that quiet moment, the world seemed to slow, as though every sound had softened to a gentle hum, allowing the heart to settle and the mind to breathe. The well itself was simple and unassuming, its stone edges worn smooth by the hands of many who had come before, each seeking something they could not yet name. The water inside shimmered quietly, reflecting the sky in delicate ripples, and for anyone who paused long enough, it seemed almost to invite stillness. She approached with measured steps, her mind heavy with thoughts that had weighed her down for many days. She carried a weariness that had nothing to do with the work of carrying jars or walking miles. It was the weight of questions, the restlessness of a heart that longed for more than routine or expectation. Each step toward the water felt tentative, as if she feared what she might find, yet there was also a sense of hope, a small, quiet flicker that whispered the possibility of relief. Her hands rested lightly on the rim of the well as she peered into the still water, the faint reflection of her own face looking back at her, mingling with the soft blue of the sky above. The water's surface moved gently with the rhythm of the wind, creating tiny waves that lapped softly against the stone. Each ripple seemed to carry a message of calm, a subtle reminder that life's pace could slow, even if just for a moment. She listened to the quiet, letting the sound of the water fill the space around her, washing over the thoughts that had churned in her mind. It was not the roar of a river or the rush of a stream. It was a patient, steady presence, inviting her to pause and simply exist, unburdened, if only for a little while. As she drew water from the well, she thought of the many times she had come and gone, never feeling fully satisfied, never feeling that the thirst in her heart had been quenched. The water she held in her hands was cool and steady, yet it could not reach the deeper longing she carried inside. Her restlessness, the quiet ache of emptiness, had become a companion she did not ask for but could not ignore. In her mind, The words of the one who waited quietly at the well began to stir, soft and gentle, yet carrying a promise she had not yet fully understood. He spoke of water, but not as she had known it before. He spoke of living water, a stream that did not fade, that satisfied not only the body but the spirit. The idea was strange, almost impossible, yet it touched something deep within her, a place that had longed for relief without knowing it could exist. The living water was not a liquid to pour into a jar. It was the quiet restoration of the heart, the soothing of the restless mind, the gentle filling of a space that had been hollow for far too long. As she listened, she felt a subtle shift, like the surface of the well responding to the words, stirring softly, reflecting the promise of calm in the depths below. Her emotions were a tapestry of confusion, hope, and relief, each thread softening the edges of the other. She did not need to justify her feelings, nor explain the years of unmet longing. They were held in the gentle presence before her, acknowledged without question, accepted without judgment. She realized that her thirst had not been for water alone, but for something far deeper, a quiet, sustaining presence that could meet her in her own restlessness and offer solace without demand. The living water offered exactly that, a gentle, unwavering invitation to pause, to breathe, and to trust that a deeper fulfillment was quietly available. The well became a sanctuary, not because it was sacred by tradition or ritual, but because in that stillness she found herself mirrored in the calm water. The ripples reflected her thoughts and questions back to her, not with answers shouted or imposed, but with subtle guidance that encouraged reflection. She understood that the water could not be rushed. That satisfaction arrived only when she allowed herself to be present, when she let the stillness carry her rather than trying to grasp or force it. In this moment, she was free to experience her longing fully, without embarrassment or fear, and yet without being overwhelmed by it. The quiet presence beside her spoke softly, words that seemed to flow as naturally as the water in the well. Each sentence fell gently, guiding her attention not outward to distraction, but inward, toward the hidden space in her heart that had grown parched over time. She realized that the living water was not a solution she had to chase or earn, but a gift quietly available to those who were willing to pause, to notice, to accept. The thirst she had carried for so long did not vanish in an instant, but it began to soften, its sharp edges dulled by the gentle understanding of presence and care. The sensation was subtle yet profound. Her mind felt lighter, her chest unburdened, and a warmth spread quietly through her, the kind that does not overwhelm but reassures. For the first time in many days, perhaps even years, she could imagine that what she had been searching for, peace, rest, understanding, a sense of completeness, was not distant or impossible, but quietly reachable, waiting only for her to acknowledge it and allow herself to receive it. The water in her hands became more than a reflection of her own image. It became a mirror of possibility, showing what could be when longing was met with patience and gentle attention. Even the familiar sounds of the day, the rustling of leaves, the occasional bird, the wind across the path, seemed to take on a different quality. They were no longer distractions or reminders of unfinished tasks. They were part of the calm, part of the rhythm that allowed her to exist in this moment fully. Her heart, which had carried a weight so quietly that few could see it, began to recognize the relief it had longed for. There was no sudden transformation, no dramatic shift, only the quiet sense that things could be different if she allowed them to be. The still water and the living water intertwined in her mind, blending reflection and promise into one seamless experience. The act of drawing water, of listening to the quiet around her, of simply being present with herself and the gentle guidance offered, created a space in which her restlessness began to fade. It was as if each ripple in the well was a reminder that healing, peace, and satisfaction arrive not in haste, but in the patient unfolding of awareness. The longing that had once felt urgent and unending softened into something approachable, manageable, and even comforting. She stayed by the well, letting the quiet stretch, letting the water reflect the soft glow of the afternoon sun. In that calm, the tension in her mind eased. The questions she carried could exist without pressure, and the emptiness that had seemed so pressing began to feel less like a void and more like an invitation. It was a reminder that fulfillment does not always arrive in dramatic gestures, but often in subtle, steady ways that are gentle enough to meet the heart exactly where it is. The sensation of acceptance, of relief, settled like a soft breeze, wrapping around her quietly. She did not need to speak, to justify, to understand fully, or to act immediately. The living water offered a presence that filled the spaces her thoughts and worries had occupied, and in that quiet filling, she began to notice a deep, calming truth. Renewal is patient, fulfillment can be gentle, and the thirst of the soul is always met when we allow ourselves to pause and receive what has quietly been waiting. The well, the water, the soft sunlight, and the gentle presence beside her all merged into a single moment of tranquility. It was a space in which longing could soften without judgment, questions could linger without urgency, and the restless heart could begin to feel held and understood. The depth of her thirst, once a source of anxiety, began to dissolve into acceptance, not as an instant resolution, but as a quiet recognition that relief can arrive gradually, subtly, and with a tenderness that invites the soul to rest and breathe freely once more. The crowd had gathered quietly, the murmurs of conversation blending into a gentle hum that seemed to float across the hillside. There was no pressing rush, no loud demands, only a gathering of people drawn by curiosity, hope, or perhaps a subtle recognition that something beyond the ordinary awaited. The day had been long, yet the presence beside them brought a stillness that felt almost tangible, as if each person could breathe a little more freely simply by existing near it. They waited not in frantic anticipation but in a calm attentiveness, the kind that allows the heart to soften and the mind to settle. In this space, the ordinary act of sharing bread became extraordinary, not through spectacle, but through the quiet generosity that flowed from one to another, a gentle offering that spoke of care, sustenance, and connection. The bread was broken slowly, deliberately, with hands that moved without haste. The loaves and fish multiplied quietly in the awareness of those who watched, enough for everyone to take, yet without fanfare or announcement. Each piece passed from hand to hand, a simple gesture that carried weight beyond its size. There was no chaos, no clamor for more, no pressing insistence. The provision seemed to settle naturally into the rhythm of the gathering. Eyes met across the small, shared space. Smiles appeared unforced, and even the quiet murmur of gratitude felt like a soft tide moving through the crowd. In this act, nourishment became more than food. It became reassurance, a gentle reminder that in times of need, presence and care can flow silently yet abundantly. As the light of the day began to wane, the scene shifted naturally toward the shore. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving space for a smaller group to follow along the path to a quiet boat. The sea was calm in the early evening, waves lapping gently against the hull, the wind moving softly across the surface, carrying the faint scent of salt and water. The rhythm of the waves was slow, deliberate, and soothing, echoing the gentle cadence of breath, offering a natural pace for hearts to adjust from the activity of the day to the stillness of night. The sky reflected soft pastels fading into deeper blues, creating a sense of quiet anticipation, a space where the mind could pause and the soul could absorb the subtle beauty around it. The disciples guided the boat carefully, mindful of the water and its movements, yet there was no tension, no sense of panic. The waves were steady, predictable, and calming, rocking the boat in a gentle pattern that encouraged focus without distraction. In this environment, fear did not erupt into alarm. Instead, it lingered softly, allowing awareness to notice the unknown without being consumed by it. The sea at night had a way of inviting introspection, of encouraging hearts to recognize what lay within as much as what lay beyond. Every sway of the boat, every soft splash against its side, became a reminder that motion, even when uncertain, could be experienced with calm attention and gentle trust. When the figure appeared walking upon the water, the scene did not erupt into astonishment or chaos. There was no dramatic flare, no sudden shock to hearts and minds. Instead, a subtle reassurance spread across the boat, a quiet recognition that presence itself could carry authority, calm, and guidance without force. Each step across the surface seemed measured and steady, as if the movement itself were an invitation to release fear, to let go of doubt, and to rest in something larger than the immediate circumstances. The water did not resist. It did not leap or roar. It simply supported, a pliant surface beneath a patient and steady presence. Fear, which had whispered quietly in the hearts of those aboard, began to dissolve in the face of this demonstration. not because the act itself demanded belief or understanding, but because the reassurance it carried was undeniable. There was a lesson in the calmness, in the measured steps, in the way the water embraced rather than resisted. Trust grew not from the miraculous spectacle but from the steady presence that allowed hearts to relax. It was not about awe or spectacle. It was about recognition that in the midst of uncertainty, a calm and reliable presence could guide and sustain without pressure. The rhythm of the waves became a meditation, a pattern for the mind to follow. Each rise and fall mirrored the quiet shifting of doubt into understanding, the slow movement of anxiety into a steady acceptance. The disciples could feel their hearts align with the motion, senses attuned not to danger but to subtle reassurance. This was not about mastering fear through force, but about allowing it to transform naturally as trust quietly settled in. The water, the wind, and the steady presence all collaborated to create a space in which fear could be noticed without clinging, understood without resisting, and released without tension. Walking closer, the presence on the water maintained the same calm, measured steps. The disciples did not need to shout, gesture, or demand attention. Each subtle movement encouraged surrender, a gentle letting go of control in favor of trust. The sea, vast and dark, became a companion rather than a threat, each ripple a soft note in a symphony of assurance that the night could be traversed safely even when visibility was low and certainty was uncertain. In this, the lesson unfolded softly. Trust does not require grand gestures or dramatic proclamations. It grows quietly, nurtured by steady guidance and the patience to move with what is present rather than resist it. The night deepened, and with it, the stillness of the water amplified the effect of every quiet exchange. The soft slap of waves against the boat, the faint creak of its wooden hull, and the gentle lapping of water against oars created a rhythm that settled restless minds. Even the occasional gust of wind carried not alarm but a reminder of natural movement, of forces beyond control that could nonetheless be navigated with calm attention. The boat became a microcosm of the heart, where anxiety could be recognized, processed, and softened through the steady, reassuring presence that guided each step across uncertainty. The crowd earlier that day, nourished and still, and now the boat, guided and calm, both revealed the same principle: provision, reassurance, and trust need not be dramatic or overwhelming to be effective. The quiet breaking of bread had fed the body and eased minds. The quiet walking on water fed the soul and quieted fear. The lessons of the day and night intertwined, showing that calm attention, gentle care, and steady presence offer more profound reassurance than spectacle or noise ever could. Each subtle act, each measured step, created a space for hearts to settle, for trust to grow, and for fear to lose its grip. Even as the boat moved steadily across the night sea, the disciples felt the tension in their shoulders ease, the tightness in their chests release, and the anxious thoughts that had clung to them soften into quiet acceptance. There was no need for rapid comprehension, no demand for immediate understanding. The night, the water, and the calm steps offered a rhythm that allowed the mind to follow gently, letting go of control while still feeling safe. Each wave, each breath of wind, each subtle movement became a point of meditation, a reminder that surrender does not equal weakness and trust does not require certainty. The experience was slow, measured, and deeply human. Fear and uncertainty were acknowledged without shame, doubt was present without judgment, and trust emerged naturally, encouraged by steady presence rather than coercion. Every subtle detail, the ripple of the water, the shifting reflection of moonlight, the quiet consistency of steps across the dark surface worked together to create a sense of reassurance that seeped into hearts gradually. This reassurance was not a dramatic miracle. It was a gentle, continuous unfolding, a quiet trust that builds when attention is given without pressure and when presence is patient without demand. In the midst of the slow waves and whispering wind, a sense of calm settled not only over the boat but within each person aboard. The night became a mirror of inner motion, a reflection of the subtle transitions from fear to trust, from uncertainty to confidence. The steady rhythm of the water encouraged hearts to surrender gently, to release tension, and to feel a quiet assurance that even in darkness, guidance, safety, and presence could be relied upon. Each moment invited the listener to experience the slow, comforting progression from anxiety to calm, from restless attention to steady awareness, and from inner doubt to trust quietly held. The boat continued its movement, the presence on the water maintaining unwavering calm, and the disciples allowed themselves to absorb each subtle lesson embedded in the quiet night. They felt the reassurance of steady steps beneath uncertainty, the soothing repetition of motion beneath fear, and the gentle invitation to trust without needing to force understanding. In this way, the feeding of the crowd and the walking on water were not separate events but connected lessons of provision, presence, and calm reassurance. Every movement, every subtle gesture, and every quiet moment contributed to a growing sense of ease, acceptance, and gentle confidence that the night, like life, could be navigated with calm attention and soft trust, even when uncertainty lingered and darkness prevailed. The evening air was soft, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass, mingling with the gentle hush of settling shadows. The world seemed to stretch quietly around every tree and hill, as if it had paused to breathe, allowing a moment of stillness to permeate everything. In that calm, a presence moved quietly among the fields, not hurried or insistent, but deliberate in its care, attentive to each sound, each movement, and each subtle shift of light. There was a feeling that, even in the vast openness, no one would be overlooked, no one left unnoticed, as if every detail of the landscape was held in a tender embrace. A voice rose softly, not loud or commanding, but patient and steady, flowing like a gentle stream over stones worn smooth by time. "I am the bread of life," it whispered, the words wrapping themselves around the edges of the heart in a way that felt like warm reassurance. They repeated softly, a subtle echo in the spaces of quiet mind, gentle enough to be absorbed without thought, allowing a listener to drift into awareness without effort. "I am the light of the world," it said next, carrying a sense of calm illumination that did not glare or demand attention, but simply allowed the eyes to adjust, letting the darkness of confusion and worry soften around the edges. With each phrase, the sense of being known deepened, like the familiarity of a familiar path beneath one's feet, or the warmth of a hand resting lightly on the shoulder in reassurance. "I am the door," the voice continued, guiding without pressure, inviting entry into a space of comfort and rest. Each statement felt like a step closer to a place where questions could exist without urgency, where fears could float away quietly, and where the heart could recognize a safe presence that needed no explanation or justification to be trusted. It was a rhythm, slow and deliberate, a lullaby in words that traced patterns across the mind like gentle waves caressing the shore. The imagery of a shepherd came to life as the words continued to unfold, describing a quiet figure moving among the hills and valleys, guiding with patience rather than force. Each sheep or listener was known, recognized individually, as if the vastness of the landscape could never obscure the uniqueness of one life. The shepherd did not rush or command, but moved attentively, walking with careful awareness of every step, every stumble, every small distraction. The sound of the staff tapping softly on the earth, the rustle of garments against the grass, the subtle murmurs of guidance all formed a delicate background of safety that encouraged hearts to rest, to pause, and to trust. Even when the path seemed uncertain, the voice never wavered. It continued in repetition, each statement a gentle reassurance of presence and care. "I am the good shepherd," it murmured, and the words carried an unspoken promise that even if one wandered, even if the way ahead was shadowed or unclear, there was guidance, warmth, and protection available. The notion of being lost was acknowledged, not to instill fear, but to gently mirror human experience, to let the listener recognize familiar feelings without anxiety. Being called by name meant being seen in the quiet, in the private corners of the mind, in the unnoticed moments where loneliness or uncertainty might have crept in. The night seemed to draw closer, wrapping the landscape in deeper blues and soft silvers, and with it, the voice flowed more like a lullaby, repeating with a rhythm that invited hearts to synchronize, to ease, and to rest. "I am the resurrection and the life," it breathed, tender and measured, not seeking response but offering comfort, a presence steady as the stars beginning to appear overhead. Every syllable carried the subtle weight of being known, of being called out from the shadows into gentle recognition. The listener, even if unaware consciously, felt the edges of fear and isolation soften, as if the voice itself were brushing against every anxious thought and turning it into calm attention. The shepherd's path led through valleys and along streams, over hills and past silent groves, moving with care and awareness, pausing for each step, and waiting patiently for those who lagged or hesitated. There was no condemnation in the pause, only a quiet acceptance that each moment was exactly as it should be. To be called by name was not to be coerced or hurried, but to be invited into recognition, to be reminded that one's presence mattered, that one's concerns, doubts, and quiet hopes were noticed in a way that brought gentle reassurance rather than pressure. The imagery carried the subtle suggestion that guidance and belonging were available at any time, not because the journey was easy, but because care moved consistently and attentively alongside every step. Each repetition of the statements felt like a thread weaving through the night air, forming a gentle tapestry of recognition and calm. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," the voice continued, ebbing softly through the quiet world, matching the slow rise and fall of breath. There was no rush, no urgency, only a slow unfolding, as if each phrase had been measured to align with the natural rhythms of heart and mind. Every listener could hear it in their own way, letting the words settle gently, leaving space for reflection, rest, and quiet understanding. Even moments of wandering thought were embraced by the cadence, recognized without judgment, and returned softly to the current of reassurance. The night deepened, and the stars above shimmered faintly, their soft light reflecting across fields and streams, across quiet paths and still waters. Each point of light seemed to echo the notion that being known was not limited to what was immediately visible or accessible. There was a subtle reassurance in the constancy of the stars, just as there was a reassurance in the consistency of the shepherd's voice. Each step, each softly spoken "I am" statement, was a quiet reminder that guidance and protection are present even when the path cannot be seen clearly, that being called by name is a recognition that touches deeper than sight or understanding. The voice spoke again of peace, of rest, of presence, each phrase carrying the soft insistence of lullabies learned in childhood but now deepened with layers of meaning and care. "I am with you always," it whispered, not as a distant promise, but as an immediate comfort, present in the quiet night, in the spaces between thought, in the stillness that allowed hearts to settle. Even the gentle rustle of leaves or the distant flow of a stream became part of the rhythm, integrating the world's natural cadence into the fabric of reassurance. In that quiet, the listener could feel the weight of being seen, of being held, and of being guided without pressure. The voice did not demand comprehension, nor did it push for immediate response. It simply carried recognition and calm. The repetition of the statements formed a gentle loop, allowing the mind to relax into the understanding that belonging, protection, and care were not conditional, not earned, and not fleeting, but quietly present, continuously available, like the night sky, like the soft earth, like a hand brushing gently along the heart. The shepherd continued to walk, steps deliberate yet unhurried, pausing for those who lingered, speaking softly into the spaces where quiet questions rested. Each phrase of the "I am" statements was like a note in a slow lullaby, inviting the heart to settle, the mind to release tension, and the spirit to notice the presence that quietly accompanied every step. It was not a spectacle or a dramatic proclamation, but a consistent, gentle, and personal recognition that each individual mattered, that every wandering thought could find calm, and that even in moments of uncertainty, there was a hand quietly guiding, a presence quietly seeing, and a voice quietly calling by name. Every breath of wind, every subtle movement in the fields, every shimmer of starlight seemed to echo the rhythm of reassurance. The listener could sense that they were not alone, that each heartbeat and each thought had been noticed, that guidance was present even when unseen. The night carried the repetition of gentle words, weaving through the mind like a soft melody, a tender recognition of being seen, held, and known. Even in the quietest, most private corners of thought, the voice reached softly, bringing the slow, steady comfort of being understood, accepted, and invited into a calm, restful presence. In the soft hush of the evening, there was a feeling of safety, of quiet belonging, of being gently led along paths both familiar and unknown. Each statement, each whisper, each soft repetition created a sense of calm surrender, allowing the mind to rest, the heart to ease, and the spirit to feel tenderly known. The voice, flowing in lullaby-like rhythm, offered reassurance not through force or urgency but through steady presence, repeating over and over that each person mattered, each longing was acknowledged, and each step could be taken with quiet confidence, supported by a guide who knew the name, the story, and the heart of each wandering soul. The room was quiet except for the faint flicker of candlelight, soft flames dancing gently against the walls and casting moving shadows that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the night. The air carried a subtle warmth, not from heat alone, but from the intimacy of presence, the kind that wraps itself around the heart and invites calm awareness. Outside, the city's noises had dimmed to distant whispers, leaving space for reflection and quiet connection. The table in the center of the room was modest, yet the simplicity added to the sense of intimacy, as though every object, every plate, and every cup had been placed with care and intention. The soft glow of the candles seemed to illuminate not just the room, but the subtle threads of emotion that wove through each gathered person, creating a gentle atmosphere of closeness and reflection. He sat at the head of the table, not with grandeur or spectacle, but with the steady, quiet authority of someone who understood the hearts around him. His gaze moved slowly from face to face, pausing not to judge, but to notice and acknowledge the weight carried by each. The disciples, gathered in various states of attention, responded with gentle shifts, subtle movements, and soft glances, the stillness of the evening encouraging them to become aware of the significance of the moment without needing words to force recognition. Each flicker of the candle seemed to mirror the subtle fluctuations of thought and emotion in the room, moments of worry softened by trust, hints of fear eased by the warmth of reassurance, and a quiet anticipation that something profound was unfolding even without urgency or demand. As he spoke, his words floated across the table like a gentle melody, not demanding, not insistent, but carrying the weight of understanding and care. "Let not your heart be troubled," he whispered, each syllable falling softly into the attentive spaces of their hearts, the phrase repeated quietly in the shadows, as though the candles themselves had absorbed it and reflected it back in warmth. It was not a statement made to quell alarm in a single moment, but a rhythm, a constant reassurance woven into the very fabric of presence. The words invited listeners to release tension, to allow their minds to settle, and to trust in the quiet constancy of care that had quietly accompanied them throughout their journey. Around the table, the interactions were subtle yet meaningful. Hands touched gently in shared acknowledgement, eyes met in silent understanding, and small gestures conveyed connection without overt dramatics. The breaking of bread and passing of the cup were deliberate, not hurried, each movement echoing the rhythm of trust and presence. These acts carried more than ritual. They carried the quiet weight of belonging, of being seen, and of participating in something tenderly shared. Every sip, every small bite, and every gentle glance reinforced the feeling of being held in a safe and intimate space where emotions could exist without judgment and the heart could absorb reassurance without effort. The shadows cast by the candlelight seemed to hold space for reflection, allowing worries to soften at the edges and fear to lose its sharpness. Each movement, each flicker, became a subtle guide, encouraging the disciples to focus not on what might come or what could be lost, but on the presence that stood quietly among them. The words of gentle reassurance were repeated in variations, not as reminders of impending events, but as anchors for the heart. "Let not your heart be troubled." The voice flowed again, blending with the muted sounds of shifting bodies and the subtle creak of wooden chairs, creating a calm cadence that invited the mind to follow and the spirit to rest. The emotional landscape of the room was deep yet soft, like shadows stretching across a quiet evening. Each disciple carried thoughts and concerns, unspoken questions, and quiet fears, yet the atmosphere allowed these to exist without tension. They were acknowledged not with reprimand, but with gentle affirmation and patience. The soft illumination highlighted not just faces, but expressions of trust, curiosity, and subtle vulnerability. Every sigh, every lowered gaze, every brief smile reflected a shared recognition of the moment's significance and the care embedded in the presence before them. Love flowed subtly through the space, not as a loud proclamation, but as a quiet undercurrent linking each individual. The gestures, the attentive listening, and the soft repetition of comforting phrases created a gentle network of connection. The presence at the head of the table guided without insistence, spoke without commanding, and held without pressure. Every phrase, every careful movement, and every soft glance worked together to weave a sense of belonging and peace that penetrated the quiet hearts of those gathered. The intimacy was not dramatic, but steady, a slow unfolding of understanding that permitted hearts to soften and minds to release concern. As the evening wore on, the room seemed suspended in the gentle balance between light and shadow, word and silence, presence and anticipation. The small flames of the candles mirrored the subtle sparks of recognition and trust developing in each heart. There was no rush, no clamor to grasp understanding or control. Instead, the cadence of conversation, the measured repetition of reassuring words, and the tender care in every gesture allowed awareness to grow naturally. The disciples could feel themselves cradled in a moment that honored both their fears and their hopes, a space where emotional surrender did not require abandoning thought, and calm confidence did not demand courage beyond their capacity. Even the objects on the table seemed part of this quiet symphony. The bread, simple and unassuming, became a symbol not only of physical nourishment but of shared care and gentle attentiveness. The cup, modest in its presence, carried not only sustenance but the unspoken promise of connection and reassurance. The candlelight wrapped these items in a soft glow, emphasizing not their function alone, but the meaning embedded in the deliberate, unhurried interaction around them. Each element, each gesture, and each softly spoken phrase worked together to create a sense of emotional safety and a steady rhythm that encouraged the heart to rest and the mind to follow the gentle cadence. The words continued to flow, punctuated by pauses that allowed reflection, not because comprehension was demanded, but because presence itself was enough. Every phrase, especially the repeated encouragement to release worry and embrace calm, seemed to resonate through the quiet spaces of the room, softening tension and easing attention away from fear. It was a dialogue that did not seek answers but offered assurance, a lullaby of reassurance delivered through patient observation, measured speech, and gentle repetition. Even when the mind wandered to future concerns or past regrets, the atmosphere encouraged return to calm awareness, a space where hearts could find rest in subtle recognition and consistent presence. In this intimate circle, the feeling of being understood, known, and cared for grew quietly yet powerfully. Each individual could feel the weight of worry lift just slightly, the edges of fear blur into softness, and the warmth of steady attention settle within the chest. It was a reassurance not of absence of difficulty, but of unwavering companionship and gentle guidance. The quiet interplay of shadow and light, presence and phrase, created a rhythm that encouraged reflection, release, and emotional acceptance without urgency, aligning the heart with the stillness of the room and the gentle cadence of human connection. Every subtle glance, every soft word, every careful gesture reinforced the underlying message. Hearts could rest, souls could find safety, and even in the awareness of forthcoming partings, there was love and care sufficient to carry through the night. The repeated phrases of reassurance, the candlelight casting a slow-moving glow, and the quiet attentiveness of those gathered wove together to create a space where emotional surrender was gentle, trust was nurtured without demand, and the slow rhythm of compassion allowed the mind to soften, the heart to quiet, and the spirit to feel embraced by steady, quiet presence. The upper room, in its soft illumination, became a sanctuary not through grandeur or spectacle, but through the measured unfolding of reassurance and care. Each moment of shared attention, every whisper of encouragement, and every delicate interplay of shadow and candlelight combined to produce an environment where fear softened, trust gently emerged, and emotional closeness deepened. Even as the night continued to stretch beyond the walls, the rhythm of quiet guidance, gentle words, and tender presence held the hearts together, creating a space where even unspoken thoughts could rest in safety, and each person could feel known, cared for, and quietly sustained. The garden lay under the quiet canopy of night, shadows weaving themselves gently between the trees and over the soft earth. Leaves rustled ever so slightly in the cool breeze, each movement like a soft exhale that blended with the distant murmur of night creatures and the faint sigh of the air through branches. Moonlight filtered down in silvery threads, touching the contours of the garden with a delicate, gentle light, illuminating the shapes of olive trees, the texture of bark, and the quiet folds of grass beneath bare feet. The world seemed to hold its breath, as though inviting every heart within the garden to do the same, to pause and notice, to soften and settle into the rhythm of stillness. He moved quietly among the trees, each step deliberate yet unhurried, feeling the earth beneath him, the slight resistance of roots, the softness of fallen leaves. The night was deep and full, yet not heavy, carrying a sense of peace that allowed the mind to rest even as the heart carried weight. He knelt among the olive trees, palms resting lightly on the soil, feeling the cool texture, the subtle grounding of the earth beneath. Every breath became a point of awareness, inhaling the subtle scent of the garden, olive, damp earth, and the soft fragrance of night-blooming flowers, and exhaling tension into the surrounding stillness. The air itself seemed to cradle the quiet surrender unfolding within him, a companion to the soft, inward prayers that flowed without demand or expectation. Words emerged gently, soft and reflective, not rushed or forceful, drifting like whispers through the quiet night. Each phrase was measured, deliberate, carrying intention without urgency, a quiet expression of seeking and of openness. "Father," the voice breathed softly, a murmured reflection that carried both trust and vulnerability, a recognition of human limitation paired with a willingness to receive guidance and comfort. There was no struggle to force resolution, no dramatic plea for change, only the quiet articulation of inner longing, the tender acknowledgement of uncertainty, and the subtle release of control into the encompassing presence that surrounded him. The olive trees seemed to lean closer, their branches swaying softly in response to the night wind, their leaves brushing faintly against one another in gentle conversation with the quiet world. Shadows played across the uneven ground, creating an ever-shifting mosaic of light and dark that mirrored the ebb and flow of thought and emotion. Every movement, subtle and slow, carried an almost meditative quality, allowing the heart to align with the rhythm of the night. Vulnerability was present, yet it was not heavy or frightening. It was embraced as a natural part of being, acknowledged with softness and allowed to exist without resistance. Time moved differently in the garden, measured not in minutes but in moments of awareness. Each inhalation drew in calm, each exhalation released tension. There was space for quiet reflection, for noticing the interplay of shadow and light, the faint sound of distant creatures, the gentle rustle of leaves. The heart could sense the presence of something steady and reassuring, not as a forceful correction or dramatic intervention, but as a quiet companion accompanying every thought, every worry, every lingering question. In this space, prayer became not a performance, but a soft dialogue, a breathing in and out that aligned human desire with the quiet rhythm of trust and acceptance. The moonlight reflected softly on the leaves, tracing silver edges along branches, highlighting small clusters of olives and the delicate folds of their skins. The garden was alive yet still, moving subtly in a rhythm that did not demand attention, but offered gentle observation for those willing to notice. Every shadow, every gentle sway, and every faint glimmer of light seemed to echo the internal motion of heart and mind, as though the garden itself had absorbed the whispers of quiet surrender and returned them in a calm, unbroken cadence. The scene encouraged the heart to soften, to acknowledge vulnerability, and to allow itself to rest in the gentle balance between awareness and acceptance. He paused to feel the coolness of the earth beneath his hands, pressing lightly into the soil, as if to anchor himself in the quiet presence surrounding him. There was no need for dramatic gestures or expressive displays. The simplicity of touch, the awareness of each small detail, the texture of leaves, the weight of soil, the faint scent of evening air offered profound grounding. The natural world moved around him without hurry, and in the subtle rhythm of wind through branches, distant water flowing, and the occasional whisper of a night bird, he found a companion to his quiet prayers. The world of the garden became a mirror to the stillness within, each element reinforcing the gentle surrender that was being practiced quietly, step by step, breath by breath. His words, though softly spoken, carried intention, the repetition of thought serving as both affirmation and gentle guidance for the heart. There was a sense of opening fully to the present moment, of allowing feelings to exist without judgment or rush, and of inviting the stillness of the night to wash over tension and anxiety. Every phrase, every quiet murmur of prayer seemed to ripple through the garden, merging with the subtle rhythm of natural sounds. The night became a canvas, holding space for reflection, acceptance, and calm attentiveness, where human vulnerability could be honored without fear or urgency. Even the small movements of the trees, the sway of branches, and the brushing of leaves seemed to participate in the quiet dialogue, offering a natural rhythm to guide attention inward. Each pause between breaths, Each quiet acknowledgement of presence reinforced the subtle lesson that surrender need not be dramatic, that vulnerability need not be alarming, and that trust can grow gently when given time and space. The garden held no judgment, no demand, only a steady companionship that allowed heart and mind to soften gradually and safely. There was a rhythm in the stillness that encouraged a slowing of thought, a quieting of the restless mind, and an opening of the heart to gentle acceptance. The night carried a softness that enveloped every detail: the curve of a branch, the texture of bark, the faint shimmer of moonlight on leaves, and infused it with a subtle sense of calm. In this atmosphere, every whispered word of prayer, every breath drawn with intention, became a thread woven into the larger tapestry of quiet surrender. The garden's presence mirrored the internal process, a gentle recognition of human limitation, a patient allowance for doubt and hesitation, and a nurturing of the heart into slow, measured peace. Time seemed suspended, yet it moved subtly, each minute marked by the gentle unfolding of thought and sensation. The night sky stretched across the garden, dotted with stars faintly visible between the limbs of olive trees. Their quiet shimmer reflected the ongoing rhythm of awareness within the garden, offering the suggestion of continuity, constancy, and presence. In the stillness, the heart could feel seen, the mind could release the need for control, and the spirit could settle into the gentle cadence of night, echoing the soft murmur of prayers and the tender movement of leaves. He rose slowly, acknowledging each step as intentional yet unhurried, moving through the garden with a gentle awareness that mirrored the quiet depth of internal reflection. Every footprint in the soil, every touch of hand on leaf or branch, seemed to hold meaning beyond action alone, reflecting a rhythm of acceptance, trust, and soft courage. The garden itself seemed to breathe with him, each motion resonating through shadows and moonlight, creating a subtle harmony that encouraged calm observation, tender reflection, and slow, emotional surrender. Even as the night deepened and shadows thickened, there was no fear, only presence. The garden held the quiet of acceptance, the gentle weightlessness of vulnerability embraced, and the slow rhythm of reflection that invited the heart to soften. The gentle motions, soft words, and careful awareness allowed each inner thought and emotion to exist without disturbance, each moment of stillness offering guidance, reassurance, and a calm invitation to rest within the night's embrace. The Garden of Gethsemane, under the silvery glow and quiet attention, became a sanctuary where human vulnerability could be met with tenderness, and quiet surrender could unfold slowly, fully, and without resistance. The breeze shifted softly, carrying the faint aroma of olives and earth, mingling with the lingering warmth of human presence, leaving a trace of reassurance in its wake. Every subtle sound, every shadow, every flicker of moonlight reinforced the quiet, deliberate pace that the garden seemed to insist upon. The night allowed for the gradual release of tension, the soft acknowledgement of limitations, and the gentle embracing of the still, patient unfolding of life, heart, and thought. In this nocturnal sanctuary, acceptance was not passive, but active through awareness, reflection, and soft surrender, inviting a slow, steady alignment of the human heart with the quiet rhythm of presence, trust, and gentle calm. The hill stood quietly under a sky heavy with muted shades, the air still and dense with the weight of passing hours. The silhouettes of the cross and those who lingered beneath it seemed etched in soft shadow, each figure quietly holding the space around them. There was no clamor, no dramatized lamentation, only the profound stillness that comes with presence and awareness, the kind of silence that fills the heart even before words can form. Darkness stretched across the landscape, not as a herald of fear, but as a gentle curtain, softening shapes, muting edges, and inviting the mind to lean into observation rather than judgment. Every breath seemed to draw in the depth of the moment, and every exhale allowed the heart to settle further into the quiet, absorbing the weight of the scene with tenderness and empathy. The figure upon the cross, though carrying unimaginable strain, was calm in a way that did not demand recognition but quietly radiated acceptance. The pain was present, yet it was softened by a sense of purpose, a subtle surrender that transformed suffering into stillness rather than chaos. Those who watched, friends, followers, and distant observers alike, were quiet, not because of shock alone, but because the moment itself invited contemplation rather than spectacle. Their grief was muted, deep, personal and reflective, blending into the long shadows that moved slowly across the ground. Each heartbeat, each sigh, seemed amplified in the vast heavy air, the silence giving space for sorrow, reverence, and quiet understanding to intertwine. Darkness enveloped the land, deepening as the hours unfolded, carrying a sense of pause. The sun's retreat was gradual, not abrupt, leaving an indigo cloak over the earth that encouraged reflection and inward movement. The night held a stillness that allowed the heart to absorb the enormity of what had occurred, to feel the human vulnerability alongside the quiet assurance of intention fulfilled. The clouds overhead moved with gentle deliberation, brushing lightly against one another in slow currents, and even the wind seemed to breathe carefully, as if not to disturb the contemplative hush that had settled over the hill. In this quiet, the mind could follow the rhythm of breath, the subtle pulse of life, and the gentle unfolding of trust, releasing tension into the calm darkness. When the first light of morning arrived, it came slowly, as if hesitant to disturb the delicate peace. It brushed the edges of the horizon with pale, gentle gold, stretching across the hills and softening the remnants of shadow into subtle, shimmering gradients. The new day did not burst forth with clamor or triumph. It emerged quietly, as though the earth itself had exhaled and allowed hope to seep gently into the world. Birds began their faint calls, almost as whispers, threading through the awakening air, and the soft rustle of leaves mirrored the tender movement of awareness stirring among those who had remained through the night. The resurrection was not a dramatic spectacle but a delicate unfolding, like dawn spilling slowly over the landscape, offering the calm assurance of renewal without force or urgency. The empty tomb, when discovered, carried with it the sense of gentle revelation rather than shock. Stones that had seemed immovable in shadow were now caressed by the tender morning light, their cold surfaces reflecting the subtle warmth of a new day. Those who approached it did so slowly, quietly, their steps measured, hearts tentative yet receptive to the sense of calm restoration. There was no hurried proclamation, no immediate fanfare, only the soft recognition that what had been heavy, confined, and sorrowful was now released into something quiet, alive, and steady. Each witness could feel the weight of tension lift incrementally, the shadows of the past dissolving into soft illumination, and the stillness of acceptance settling like gentle dew across the landscape. The air itself seemed infused with the possibility of renewal, not in a way that demanded excitement, but in the subtle restorative quality that comes from deep, unhurried awareness. The light touched faces with soft warmth, revealing expressions of understanding, quiet awe, and tender relief. Each small movement, the turning of a head, the brushing aside of a veil of shadow, the tentative step forward was imbued with a sense of being allowed to inhabit this gentle renewal. The transformation was quiet, yet profound, shaping hearts from within, offering a sense of inner peace that was both calming and sustaining. In the open spaces of the early morning, the surroundings seemed to mirror the internal rhythm of hearts at rest. Trees, hills, and flowers bathed in the new light appeared less rigid, more welcoming, as if participating in the renewal that had quietly taken place. The world had not been reshaped violently or hurriedly. Instead, the transition from darkness to light moved in a gentle arc, encouraging hearts to receive calm, restoration, and hope at a natural pace. The small, subtle signs, the shimmer on leaves, the soft coo of a bird, the breeze tracing delicate lines across the earth, were reminders that life continues with continuity, patience, and quiet care, and that inner renewal can arise in the same unhurried way. Those who had gathered, and even those who came later, could feel the depth of this moment not in noise, excitement, or proclamation, but in the gentle rhythm of observation and reflection. Each breath, each step, each glance across the soft morning light reinforced the sense that life, though marked by trial, carries the possibility of calm restoration. The heart could let go of lingering tension, the mind could release urgency, and the spirit could settle into the gentle presence of continuity and care that had been quietly unfolding. Even questions and lingering doubts were permitted to exist alongside the peace, acknowledged without agitation, integrated into the gentle understanding that presence and renewal are subtle, steady, and deeply sustaining. The path from the cross to this first quiet morning carried not only the physical unfolding of events but the symbolic and emotional weight of transition. The darkness had been heavy, yet not overwhelming, allowing reflection, acknowledgement, and release. The light had arrived softly, revealing not dramatic miracles alone, but the tender, patient work of renewal that reaches into hearts slowly, persistently, and gently. Each moment of awareness, each act of quiet attention, each soft breath of acceptance contributed to a growing sense of inner calm, offering the opportunity to feel restored, seen, and quietly strengthened. In the lingering stillness, the world seemed to hold its breath again, not in anticipation, but in reflection and gentle acceptance. The stones, the trees, the hills, and the open sky all participated in the quiet narrative of renewal, emphasizing that transformation does not always need to arrive with noise, urgency, or spectacle. The heart could absorb this subtle rhythm, allowing peace to settle, hope to take root, and restoration to unfold in the spaces between thought, between breath, and between moments of quiet observation. The soft unfolding of light and life continued across the landscape, carrying with it a sense of completeness without rush. The empty cross, the quiet hills, the gently stirring earth, and the tender morning sky all seemed to converge in harmony, inviting hearts to rest, minds to soften, and spirits to acknowledge the quiet, steady presence that had accompanied the journey. Each element, the hush of the early morning, the gentle illumination, the lingering shadows dissolving into subtle brightness worked together to create a sense of calm resolution, where the story could pause naturally, holding the hearts of those who witnessed and those who imagined in a place of peace, rest, and reflective closure. Even as the day continued to awaken, the memory of the night's quiet, the hill's stillness, and the gentle arrival of light remained, leaving an imprint of calm, a sense of restored hope, and the reassurance that renewal often comes softly, persistently, and quietly. The scene, the air, and the lingering presence invited the heart to settle fully, the mind to release residual tension, and the spirit to rest in the profound yet gentle reminder that even after trials and shadows, mornings arrive in quiet beauty, offering peace, restoration, and the tender continuity of life's unhurried rhythm.